Too broke, they whispered as two flight attendants blocked a casually dressed woman from entering first class. Little did they know she owned the entire airline. When Elizabeth Morgan finally revealed her identity, their smug smiles vanished instantly, and their careers hung in the balance. The morning sun filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Azure Airways headquarters, casting a golden glow across the boardroom. Elizabeth, Liz Morgan stood at the edge of the vast panoramic view, her silhouette framed against the skyline of Chicago. From this height, the planes taking off from O'Hare looked like tiny silver birds catching the light, she mused. The quarterly numbers are impressive, said Thomas Reynolds, the CFO, as he adjusted his glasses. Revenue is up 14% from last year. Liz nodded, her attention still fixed on an Azure Airways plane taxiing on a distant runway. At 53, Elizabeth Morgan was not what most people expected when they thought of an airline CEO. She'd worked her way up from flight attendant to operations, then management, and finally to the top position just 10 months ago when the previous CEO retired unexpectedly. While her business acumen was unquestionable, she hadn't sought the limelight that typically came with such a position. "That's good, Thomas," she finally replied, turning to face the boardroom. "But I'm more concerned about the customer satisfaction reports." The energy in the room shifted. The executives exchanged glances. "We've had some challenges in that area," admitted Rachel Williams, the head of customer experience. "Complaints about staff interactions have increased by 9% this quarter." Liz's expression remained neutral, but her eyes sharpened. "Specifics, please." Rachel cleared her throat. "Most complaints center around first class and premium services. Passengers feel our staff has become elitist." Elitist. Liz repeated, the word tasting bitter. "On an airline I started working for as a flight attendant 30 years ago." The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the room. Liz had never forgotten her roots despite her remarkable rise. She still lived in the same neighborhood, drove a modest car, and often dressed casually when not in business meetings. Her humility was legendary within the company, at least among those who had been there long enough to know her story. "The problem," continued Rachel, "is that many of our newer employees don't know your history with the company. With your promotion being so recent and your preference for staying out of the media, they don't know who I am." Liz finished the thought. "And maybe that's part of the problem." She walked to the seat at the head of the table and sat down, her mind already turning over possibilities. "We've rolled out additional customer service training," Rachel offered. "But honestly, I think we're dealing with a culture issue." Liz's assistant Daniel slid a tablet in front of her. She glanced down at the customer feedback displayed on the screen. "Your first-class flight attendants treated me like I was beneath them. I felt judged by my appearance before I even boarded." The level of snobbery was astounding. Liz set the tablet down, her decision made. "I think it's time I see this for myself." "What are you suggesting?" asked Thomas, leaning forward. "An undercover boss situation," Liz replied, a hint of determination in her voice. "I'll fly as a regular passenger. No special treatment, no advance notice to the staff." The executives exchanged concerned glances. "With all due respect," Thomas said carefully, "you're the CEO. Someone might recognize you." Liz smiled slightly. "Thomas, I've been with this company 3 decades, and I just walked past 3 new employees in the lobby who had no idea who I was. Besides," she added, gesturing to her tailored business suit, "they'd never seen me like this. In casual clothes, I'm just another middle-aged woman." "It's risky," Rachel warned. "If I witness poor service firsthand, then I'll know exactly what needs fixing," Liz finished firmly. "Schedule me on the Chicago to New York route tomorrow, first class. Book it under E. Morgan. My first initial only. I'll use my personal credit card." "And if there are issues?" Daniel asked delicately. Liz's eyes held a steely resolve that her executive team recognized all too well. It was the same look she had when she proposed the fuel efficiency program that saved the airline millions. And when she championed the customer loyalty redesign that brought back thousands of lost clients. "Then we'll address them," she said simply. This airline was built on the principle that every passenger deserves respect, regardless of what they're wearing or how important they seem. If we've lost that, we need to find it again. As the meeting adjourned, Liz stayed behind, gazing once more at the planes taking off and landing in the distance. Little did she know that her impromptu investigation would become much more revealing than she had anticipated. The following morning, Liz stood in front of her bedroom mirror, studying her reflection with a critical eye. Gone was the polished CEO in designer suits and perfect hair. Instead, she wore a simple gray sweatshirt, comfortable jeans, and a navy blue baseball cap pulled low over her naturally wavy hair, which she normally kept tightly secured in a professional bun. "Perfect," she murmured, adjusting the cap. Without makeup and in casual clothes, she looked nothing like the corporate headshot that occasionally appeared in business publications or the company website. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. "Ticket confirmed. Flight 372, departing 2:15 p.m. Are you sure about this?" Liz typed back. "Absolutely. No special treatment. I want the authentic experience." Another buzz. "Car service?" She smiled to herself. "No, taking a rideshare like a regular passenger." Liz finished packing a small overnight bag with just the essentials. This wasn't about comfort or convenience. It was about understanding the real customer experience, particularly for those who didn't fit the typical first-class passenger profile. As she prepared to leave, her phone rang. It was Rachel from Customer Experience. "I've been thinking about your plan," Rachel said without preamble. "What if you experience something problematic? How do you want to handle it in the moment?" Liz paused, considering. "I'm not going in looking for trouble, Rachel. I'll give our team every opportunity to do their jobs well. And if they don't, then I'll handle it appropriately," Liz replied. "This isn't about catching people doing something wrong. It's about understanding what our passengers experience." After ending the call, Liz made one final decision. She removed her expensive watch and designer earrings, replacing them with simple studs and a basic timepiece. The devil was in the details, after all. The rideshare pulled up at exactly noon. Liz settled into the back seat, feeling strangely liberated in her anonymous appearance. "O'Hare, United Airlines Terminal," she said, intentionally naming the wrong airline. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "You got it." 20 minutes into the drive, Liz corrected her mistake. "Sorry, I meant Azure Airlines Terminal." "No problem," the driver replied casually. "Going anywhere nice?" "New York," Liz replied, slipping into the role of an ordinary passenger. "Business or pleasure?" Liz smiled. "A little of both." As they approached the airport, Liz felt a flutter of anticipation. It had been years since she'd experienced air travel like a regular passenger. As CEO, she typically used the company's private entrance or occasionally a private jet for longer distances. The driver pulled up to the departures area. "Have a good flight." Liz thanked him and stepped out, overnight bag in hand. The hustle and bustle of O'Hare enveloped her immediately. The cacophony of announcements, the stressed travelers, the long check-in lines. She bypassed the Azure Premium check-in area, intentionally joining the general line. Ahead of her, a harried mother struggled with a toddler while trying to manage her documents. Behind her, a businessman spoke loudly on his phone about merger negotiations. When her turn came, the check-in agent barely looked up. "Destination? New York JFK," Liz replied. The agent typed rapidly. "Boarding pass. E. Morgan." "That's right." The agent printed her boarding pass, still barely making eye contact. "Gate A17. Boarding begins at 1:45. No smile, no enjoy your flight," Liz noted mentally. She made her way through security, again, no special treatment, and emerged into the main terminal. As she walked toward her gate, Liz took in the Azure Airline signage, the employee interactions, the overall passenger experience, all through fresh eyes. What she would discover in the coming hours would be both troubling and transformative, not just for her, but for the entire company she had dedicated her life to building. Liz arrived at Gate A17 just as boarding was announced for passengers needing special assistance. She watched carefully as the gate agents interacted with an elderly gentleman using a walker and a young mother with twins. The staff was efficient, but not particularly warm, professional but perfunctory. "Now boarding our Azure Elite members and first-class passengers," announced the gate agent. Liz joined the line, boarding pass and ID in hand. The agent barely glanced at her documents before waving her through with considerably less enthusiasm than she showed to a man in an expensive suit who boarded just ahead of Liz. Interesting, Liz thought as she made her way down the jet bridge. At the aircraft door, a flight attendant named Natalie greeted passengers with a practiced smile. When the businessman ahead of Liz presented his boarding pass, Natalie's smile widened. "Welcome aboard, sir. Right this way to first class. Can I offer you a pre-departure beverage?" Then it was Liz's turn. Natalie's eyes flicked over Liz's casual attire, and her smile noticeably cooled. "Boarding pass, please," she said, the warmth vanishing from her voice. Liz handed it over. Natalie checked it, her eyebrows rising slightly. "First class is to the left," she said, her tone suggesting this information might be new to Liz. "Thank you," Liz replied pleasantly. As she made her way to her seat in the second row first class, Liz noticed several passengers in business attire already settled in, being attended to by another flight attendant, Sophia, who was offering champagne and hanging up suit jackets. Liz stowed her small bag in the overhead compartment and settled into her window seat. When Sophia approached with the beverage tray, her smile faltered. "Pre-departure beverage?" she asked, her tone notably less enthusiastic than it had been with the previous passengers. "Sparkling water, please," Liz requested. Sophia nodded and poured the water, setting it down without the "my pleasure" she'd offered to others. She moved on quickly to the businessman across the aisle, her attentive demeanor instantly returning. As boarding continued, Liz observed the interaction between the flight attendants and each passenger, noting the subtle differences in treatment based on appearance and perceived status. It was disturbing to witness, especially knowing this was happening throughout her airline. The flight was nearly fully boarded when a commotion at the front caught Liz's attention. Natalie was speaking in hushed but stern tones to a young man in jeans and a hoodie who was attempting to enter first class. "Sir, I'll need to see your boarding pass again," Natalie insisted. The young man, clearly embarrassed, presented his pass. "I was upgraded because of my frequent flyer status," he explained, his voice carrying to where Liz sat. Natalie studied the boarding pass with suspicion before reluctantly allowing him through, not offering the warm welcome other first-class passengers had received. The young man took his seat across from Liz, looking uncomfortable with the attention he'd drawn. Liz gave him a sympathetic smile, which he returned gratefully. As the final preparations for departure were underway, Liz decided to use the restroom. As she stood and made her way forward, Natalie and Sophia were conversing in the galley. Liz slowed her pace, listening. "Another one who doesn't belong up here," Sophia muttered, gesturing subtly toward the young man. "Did you see his sneakers?" Natalie nodded. "And that older woman in 2A, the one in the sweatshirt. First class isn't what it used to be." Liz felt her cheeks flush with anger, but kept walking, entering the restroom without being noticed by the attendants. When she emerged, she returned quietly to her seat, her mind racing with thoughts about the culture that had developed among her staff. After takeoff, the service began. Sophia distributed hot towels, handing them with elegant tongues to each passenger. When she reached Liz, however, she practically dropped the towel onto Liz's tray table. Thanks, Liz said deliberately. Sophia merely nodded and moved on. The meal service that followed continued the pattern. Liz watched as passengers in business attire received attentive, personalized service, while she and the young man in the casual clothes were treated with the bare minimum of professional courtesy. When Liz's meal arrived, she noticed it had been carelessly plated compared to her neighbor's dishes. The napkin was hastily placed, and the silverware was slightly askew. "Excuse me," Liz called to Sophia, who was passing by. "Could I have some more water, please?" In a moment, Sophia replied without stopping. 10 minutes passed. Liz's glass remained empty, while other passengers had received refills promptly upon request. Finally, Liz pressed the call button. Sophia appeared, an expression of mild annoyance crossing her face. "Yes," she asked. "I asked for water some time ago," Liz reminded her politely. "Right, sorry about that." Sophia's tone suggested she was anything but sorry. As the flight progressed, the differential treatment became increasingly obvious. The final straw came during the pre-landing service, when Natalie leaned over to collect Liz's barely touched dessert. "Finished?" Natalie asked with a hint of sarcasm. Liz looked up at her calmly. "Actually, I'd like to speak to the purser, please." Natalie's expression shifted from smug to concerned. "Is there a problem with the service?" "I'd just like to speak with the purser," Liz repeated firmly. Natalie and Sophia exchanged glances, and Sophia disappeared briefly before returning with an older flight attendant whose name tag read Catherine, lead flight attendant. "Ma'am, I understand there's an issue," Catherine asked, her tone professional but guarded. Liz looked at the 3 flight attendants now standing in the aisle. Other passengers were beginning to take notice. "Yes," Liz said, her voice steady and clear. "I'd like to understand why passengers in casual attire are receiving substantially different service than those in business clothes." Natalie's eyes widened. Sophia stiffened. "I'm not sure what you mean," Catherine replied carefully. "I think you do," Liz said, reaching for her bag and extracting a small leather wallet. She flipped it open to reveal an ID card with the Azure Airways logo. "My name is Elizabeth Morgan. I'm the CEO of this airline." The color drained from Natalie's face. Sophia took an involuntary step back, bumping into the seat behind her. Catherine, the lead flight attendant, froze in place, her professional demeanor cracking as the implication sank in. Ms. Morgan," Catherine stammered, recognition finally dawning. We had no idea." "Clearly," Liz replied, her voice calm but firm. "And that's precisely the problem, isn't it? The level of service shouldn't depend on recognizing the CEO. It should be the same for everyone who purchases a first-class ticket." By now, the nearby passengers had caught on to the unfolding drama. The businessman who had received such solicitous attention lowered his financial newspaper, watching with undisguised interest. The young man in the hoodie seemed caught between embarrassment and vindication. Natalie found her voice first. "Miss Morgan, I can explain." Liz held up a hand. "Not here, not now." She glanced at her watch. "We'll be landing in 20 minutes. I'd like to speak with all 3 of you after the passengers have deplaned." Catherine nodded quickly. "Of course, Miss Morgan. Absolutely. In the meantime," Liz continued, "I'd suggest you provide the same level of service to all of your remaining passengers for the duration of this flight." The 3 flight attendants dispersed quickly, their body language transformed. Natalie began collecting trash with a new attentiveness, while Sophia suddenly appeared at the young man's side, offering him a fresh beverage before landing. Liz sighed and looked out the window. This wasn't how she'd wanted things to go. She had hoped to observe and gather information without causing a scene. But the blatant bias she'd witnessed couldn't go unaddressed. Her phone buzzed with a text. It was Daniel. "How's the mission going?" Liz typed back, cover blown. "We'll explain later." The rest of the flight proceeded in uncomfortable silence, at least in Liz's vicinity. The flight attendants moved through the cabin with nervous efficiency, now treating every passenger with exaggerated courtesy. As the plane began its descent into JFK, the young man across the aisle leaned over. "Excuse me," he said quietly. Liz turned to him with a genuine smile, the first she'd offered since revealing her identity. "Yes. I just wanted to say thank you," he said. "I fly a lot for work, and well, that happens pretty often. Being treated differently because of how you dress." "You dress how you want?" Liz asked. He nodded. "I work in tech. We don't really do suits." "What's your name?" "Jason Lee. I'm a software engineer for health tech." Liz extended her hand. "Nice to meet you, Jason, and I apologize for your experience today." Jason shook her hand. "No need to apologize. It was worth it just to see their faces when you pulled out that ID." Liz couldn't help but laugh, her first moment of levity since the confrontation began. After a smooth landing, the aircraft taxied to the gate. Catherine's voice came over the PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to John F. Kennedy International Airport. Local time is 5:23 p.m., and the temperature is 68 degrees. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until the captain turns off the seatbelt sign." There was a pause then. "We'd also like to extend a special welcome to Azure Airways CEO, Elizabeth Morgan, who joined us on today's flight. Thank you for flying with us, Miss Morgan." A murmur went through the cabin as passengers who hadn't witnessed the earlier encounter turned to look at Liz, who acknowledged the announcement with a small nod. Once the seatbelt sign was turned off, passengers began gathering their belongings. Many cast curious glances at Liz as they passed. A few stopped to introduce themselves or comment on their Azure experiences. Mostly positive, Liz noted. Jason Lee lingered for a moment as he prepared to leave. "Good luck with." He gestured discreetly toward the flight attendants. "Thank you, Jason. And please send me an email directly if you ever experience anything like this again on one of our flights." As the last passenger exited, Liz remained seated, watching as Natalie, Sophia, and Catherine huddled near the front galley, speaking in hushed, urgent tones. Their body language told the whole story. Natalie gesticulating defensively, Sophia staring at the floor, Catherine trying to maintain composure. Liz gathered her things and moved to the front of the now empty first-class cabin. The three women immediately fell silent. "Let's talk in the crew rest area," Liz suggested, her tone making it clear this wasn't optional. As they made their way to the more private space, Liz found herself reflecting on how quickly things had changed. Just hours ago, she'd been invisible to these women, or worse, visible only as someone they deemed unworthy of proper service. Now they could barely meet her eyes. The real work was just beginning. In the privacy of the crew rest area, Liz sat across from the three flight attendants. Natalie and Sophia looked like students called to the principal's office, while Catherine maintained a semblance of professional composure, though her hands fidgeted nervously with her collar pin. "First," Liz began, "I want to make something clear. I'm not here to fire anyone today." The relief in the room was palpable, though short-lived. "However," Liz continued, "what I witnessed today was completely unacceptable and against everything Azure Airways stands for." Natalie spoke up first. "Miss Morgan, I want to apologize. If we had known who you were—" "That's exactly my point," Liz interrupted, her voice firm, but not unkind. "It shouldn't matter who I am or what I'm wearing. Every passenger deserves the same respectful service." The three women exchanged uncomfortable glances. "I started as a flight attendant with this airline 30 years ago," Liz said, letting the information sink in. "I've served drinks, handled difficult passengers, and cleaned up more messes than I care to remember. The job is demanding, often thankless, and requires endless patience. I understand that." Catherine nodded slightly, a hint of recognition in her eyes. Unlike the others, she'd been with the company long enough to have heard about Liz's background. "But what I saw today wasn't about being tired or stressed," Liz continued. It was about making judgments based on appearances. "Tell me, what made you assume I didn't belong in first class?" Silence fell over the small space. Finally, Sophia spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. "Your clothes. The way you were dressed." Liz nodded. "And if I had been wearing a designer suit?" "We would have treated you differently," Natalie admitted, unable to meet Liz's eyes. "Better. At least you recognize it," Liz said. "That's step one." She pulled out her tablet and opened her notes application. "Here's what happens now. You three will be placed on administrative leave for 1 week. During that time, you'll attend our new customer service refresher training with a focus on unconscious bias." Catherine nodded. "Yes, Ms. Morgan." "Additionally, when you return to flying, you'll each be assigned a mentor from our senior flight attendant corps, someone who exemplifies our service standards." Liz looked at each woman in turn. "I believe in second chances. I also believe that moments like this can be powerful catalysts for change, not just for individuals but for an entire organization." She stood, signaling the end of the conversation. "This incident will be documented, but your jobs are not in jeopardy if you take this opportunity to learn and grow. The real test will be what happens the next time someone who doesn't look the part sits in first class." 6 months later, Liz stood at the podium in the same boardroom where this journey had begun. Behind her, a presentation slide displayed the company's new initiative, Beyond First Impressions, the Azure Service Promise. "The data speaks for itself," Liz announced to her executive team. Customer satisfaction scores are up 23% across all cabins, with a 31% increase in first class specifically. Rachel Williams, the head of customer experience, couldn't hide her smile. The service standardization training has been implemented across all hubs, with over 5,000 staff members completing the program so far. Liz nodded appreciatively. "And the feedback from our anonymous customer evaluation program?" "Overwhelmingly positive," Rachel confirmed. "The discrepancy in service quality based on passenger appearance has decreased by 78%, according to our metrics." Thomas Reynolds, the CFO, leaned forward. "I was skeptical about the investment in this initiative, Liz, I admit it. But the numbers don't lie. Customer loyalty has increased, and we're seeing more repeat business in premium cabins." Liz smiled, thinking back to that fateful flight. After her encounter with Natalie, Sophia, and Catherine, she had returned to Chicago with a clear vision for change. Rather than limiting her response to those 3 individuals, she had used the incident as a catalyst for company-wide transformation. The story of the CEO's undercover experience had spread throughout the company, though Liz had been careful not to publicly shame the specific flight attendants involved. It had become a powerful teaching moment, making the abstract concept of unconscious bias concrete and relatable for staff at all levels. "What about Natalie, Sophia, and Catherine?" asked Daniel, voicing the question Liz knew many were curious about. "All 3 successfully completed their additional training," Liz replied. "Natalie has become one of our most vocal advocates for the new service standards. Catherine has taken position as a service trainer, sharing her experiences with new hires. And Sophia," Liz paused, remembering her most recent interaction with the young flight attendant who had once dismissed her so casually. "Sophia personally thanked me last week. She said the experience changed how she sees every passenger who boards her flights." As the meeting concluded and the executives filed out, Liz remained at the window, watching an Azure Airways plane take off against the setting sun. The incident that could have ended 3 careers had instead transformed an entire airline's culture. By choosing accountability over punishment, education over humiliation, Liz had steered her company towards something better. A place where every passenger truly mattered, regardless of appearance. And as for Liz herself, she still flew commercial regularly, sometimes in casual clothes, sometimes in business attire. But one thing never changed: she always observed, always listened, and always remembered what it felt like to be judged by a sweatshirt and a baseball cap. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Remember that true character isn't about how we treat those we think are important. It's about how we treat everyone. Share this story with someone who needs this reminder. Until next time, treat others with kindness. You never know who might be sitting across from you.